Hello everyone, welcome to week number 5 in Science 214. We are now past the halfway point in the term, so it's downhill from here. You've got 2 pretty intensive weeks, including this one, and then week 7, and I'll be talking about that in just a second. So let's see what we've got going on. Last week, we looked at data and trends in data. So it's really important in science for us to collect data points. And the only way that you can figure out what all of these data points means is to graph the data and then look at the trends. Because what are you trying to do? You're trying to figure out what the data means, right? So how is this being affected? How is the dependent variable changing based on the independent variable that you are changing? That's that second question right there. And so looking at trends in data is extremely important. Is it a positive trend? Is this dependent variable going up as your independent variable goes up? Or is it a negative trend? Is it decreasing? Is it a stable trend? And then what does this mean for the future? What are the implications of this type of trend in this particular data? So we took a look at that. Then this week, oh, this is my favorite week in the term because it's all about citizen science. Now remember the very first week I read that whole chapter in the book, right? I did. And then I boiled it down to basically a sentence. And so here it is. Here's a reminder. What is citizen science? Scientific research conducted by amateur scientists in order to what? Make discoveries, solve problems, or affect change. You can do it. I do it. I'm a scientist, but I'm not a specialist in all these different areas, and I love to participate, and I have. So this week you get to choose a citizen science project that's near and dear to your heart, and so this will be very exciting. All you have to do is type in citizen science. There are all kinds of websites out there because we're always looking for people to help us collect data out there. So I'm going to give you a few examples right here. Forensic genetic genealogy. This is a tremendously exciting part of the study of DNA, especially that has to do with forensic science. So evidence, DNA that's left behind at crime scenes is put into databases, and we try to figure out who could have left that DNA behind. Through what? Through comparing the DNA sequences from that evidence to what is in the database, and then looking at the family trees to see if you can figure out who could have done this. The first example of this was with the Golden State Killer. Look that up if you're interested. It is a tremendously interesting case. It went for over 40 years with no movement until forensic genetic genealogy came along. Now, there are citizen scientists who are willing to work tirelessly on family trees and looking at the amount of DNA that has similarity to the evidence and working this out until they figure out who might have left behind DNA. So that's very interesting. We have citizen scientists doing that. Wildlife observations, I've been involved in that. I give you an example right up here. This is a swallowtail kite, that upper right picture right there. They are very infrequent visitors to South Carolina, but I have seen them. That's one of my photographs. And you can report them and Mississippi kites. And so there's a website where you can go on there and tell where you saw it, what time it was, over what kind of field, all the circumstances, right? So that we can keep track of these very amazing birds. They're huge, and they feed by flying through the air and catching flying insects. They're very fast and very agile. Amazing to watch. I've never been involved in counting monarch butterflies, but this is also another one of my photographs, and they come through the Charleston area at least in November of every year in huge numbers, and I have seen them and photographed them during this migration time. NASA is always looking for amateur astronomers, people with telescopes, to look out there into space and discover things, because the more eyes we have out there, the better. the example that I gave in the very beginning of Lyme disease in Connecticut. Lyme disease was discovered because of two mothers and their observations that all these cases of juvenile arthritis were very unusual. And so there had to be something going on. And sure enough, there was. It is a tick-borne disease caused by bacteria, Borrelia burgdorferi, that causes Lyme disease. And it was discovered because these two mothers insisted that someone come out and take a look and figure out what was going on. I already mentioned the monarch butterflies. Also in my area at Lake Wiley, which is about 2 miles from my house, there's a group called River Keepers, and they test the water quality of this lake throughout the year, and then usually in the summertime when it's hot and when there's a turnover of the water in the lake. There are warnings about people swimming in the lake because the fecal bacterial count is so high that it can make people sick. So those are just a few examples. All you have to do is search for this. Citizenscience.org, I think, is one of the websites, but look in your area too. There will be lots of examples of these projects wherever it is that you live. And pick something that you're really interested in. There's all different types. So pick something that you're interested in. Oh, I love reading about these. So I'm very excited about this week. Then you've got your Module 5 project draft. These are parts 2 and 3. Let me move my face. I always got my face in weird places. I'm just going to hit on the high points of this. Make sure you use your guidelines. You're used to this now, so I only should have to hit the highlights here. Information gaps for your particular project. What are they? What are the ethical implications of this? And how do we go about closing these gaps? What are the biases and how do they impact your particular topic? How does media bias influence your particular topic? And how will you communicate to a diverse audience? This is one of the most important things that you can ever learn, is how to present information to your audience so that they care about it and so that they will listen to you and your viewpoint, right? Very important. So that means you have to understand your audience before you start speaking to them, presenting to them, putting stuff out on social media, whatever it is that you're doing. You have to figure this out in order to be an effective communicator in whatever walk of life you decide to travel down, right? Part 3 is all about collaboration. Now, I will say in science, especially for me and for what I've done over time, collaboration is extremely important. So when I was working on writing up my research, I would ask anybody who would read my work, please read this and give me feedback. Now, do you normally do that? Say you have an English paper that you've written, an essay. Do you walk around to strangers? Now, I didn't do this with strangers, but basically everybody that I knew. Would you give your essay to everybody and say, how about read this and tell me what you think about it, and tell me where there are questions that are raised that I haven't answered, etc., etc., etc. We did this all the time in my research group and to people outside our research group. You've got to collaborate with other scientists to figure out where your information gaps are and what questions you need to answer and what's not clear in your writing. The contributions of the scientific community toward a particular topic are really important, including yours, whether it's climate change or water quality or whatever it is. And what is the importance of different and diverse perspectives? This is terribly important, right? Because we all look at things through a certain lens, through our experience. And we need to see everything from different and diverse perspectives so that we get the whole picture. This is terribly important. There will be things that you don't even consider. So make sure you explain that. And then tips of the week. you need to take time off for yourself, please make sure you do that. You can't just work. If you do, you will burn yourself out. So don't do it. Take time off for yourself. Put this time into your schedule. Even if it's going to sit outside. I used to do this a lot. I haven't done a lot of it lately, but I do walk. But just go outside and sit in the quiet without looking at your phone. Yeah, just be quiet and look at nature. And if that doesn't work, go to a park. If that doesn't work, get in a kayak and kayak across the lake. Take time off for yourself. Don't forget to have fun. Do fun stuff. Laugh. Get together with your crazy friends. Boy, I do. I have a lot of crazy friends. My sister's crazy too. So anyway, don't forget to have fun and let loose and blow off steam. This helps you get rid of stress and find yourself a support system. And I will tell you that was not particularly easy for me when I went back to school. There were people in my family who did not agree with me going back to school. They thought it was a waste of time and that I should have been doing other things. And in the end, I showed them, because I have helped take care of so many different people in my family because of the career that I built for myself. Find yourself a support system. Friends that you can count on. Spouses if you can. Other family members that you can. People who you are in school with. People who are in your same situation. Find yourself a support system. And sometimes even use the negative comments to your benefit. Even if that's a negative narrative that's going on in your head. So when I was about to start graduate school, I kept thinking to myself, you know, I'd been out of school for 11 years and I was terrified of going back. And I kept thinking to myself, oh my goodness, this is going to be so hard. There is no way I'm not smart enough to do this. I'm so terrified of this. And then I thought about one of my husband's friends who had also just earned his PhD. Now, he was something else, let me tell you. He was probably one of the laziest people I've ever known in my entire life. And not the sharpest knife in the drawer either. And he had just earned his PhD. And you know what I said to myself? If Alan can do it, I know I can do it. And so I used that negative thought that was in my head. And I flipped it around and I used some logic. And I talked myself into going into graduate school. So find yourself a support system. And if you need somebody to cheer you on, I'd be glad to do it. I promise. I'm pretty good at that because I didn't have that much support. And so I'm willing to help you out with that one. If you get down in the dumps, even, you know, in the coming terms, just send me an email message. I'll remind you that you can do it. So, with that being said, I hope that you have a wonderful week this week. And if you need anything, remember all you have to do is email me, m.sigmon@snhu.edu. I can't wait to see what you come up with for your citizen science projects.